For the second part of our presentation, we're going to talk about Raymond Cattell's factor analytical trait theory. Raymond Cattell was a British-American psychologist known for his psychometric research into interpersonal psychological structure. His work also explored the basic dimension of personality and temperament and many multivariate research methods, including the refinement of factor analytic methods for exploring and measuring these domains. Cattell was born in England in 1905 to a family of engineers and was a bright student, graduating with his doctorate in psychology in 1929 from the University of London at the age of 23. In 1937, Cattell was invited to the United States by Edward Thorndike in New York, and it was in Illinois that he spent most of his productive years developing personality tests. In 1997, he was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Psychological Foundation. Cattell's view personality as a complex and differentiated structure of traits. Cattell defined traits as relatively permanent reaction tendency that are the basic structural units of personality. For Cattell, there are two methods that he uses in developing his theories. First is the factor analysis, a complicated statistical method that finds relationship among many different or diverse items and allows them to be grouped together, while trait theory is an approach for analyzing the structure of personality by measuring and identifying and classifying similarities and differences between trait or personality. Cattell's view on the human nature is that it can be predicted in a given situation. He believed that this is possible by using behavior as a basis. For a behavior to be considered predictable, it must be lawful and orderly, and prediction would be difficult without regularity and consistency in the personality. Cattell did not propose any ultimate or necessary goals that dominates behavior nor drive for self-actualization to pull us towards the future. No psychosocial conflicts to push us from the past, although he noted that the impact of the early life events has a factor in contributing to the development of personality, but he did not believe that the childhood forces determines the personality of an individual permanently. Cattell's approach in personality traits can be classified into different parts. First, he distinguished a common trait and the unique trait. So similar to Allport, the common trait is the one that possesses by everyone to some degree, such as intelligence, extroversion, and gregariousness, while the unique traits are those possessed by one or few persons. The second way to classify traits is to divide them into the ability traits, temperament traits, and dynamic traits. So ability traits determines how efficient we are to be able to work towards a certain goal. So, such as intelligence is an ability. So our level of intelligence will affect the way in which we strive for our goals. Temperament traits, on the other hand, describes the general style of an emotional tone of our behavior. For example, how assertive we are, how easygoing, how irritable we are, and these traits will affect the way we act and react to certain situations. While the dynamic traits are the driving force that of behavior, they define our motivation, our interest, and ambitions. The third class of traits is the surface traits versus the source traits according to their stability and permanence. So according to Cattell, surface traits are personality characteristics that correlates with one another but do not constitute a factor because they are not determined by a single force. For example, several behavioral elements such as anxiety, indecision, and irrational fear combine to form the surface traits labeled as neuroticism, while source traits is stable and permanent traits that are the basic factor of personalities. Each source traits give rise to some aspect of our behavior. So Cattell compiled a list of 17,000 personality traits and developed subsequent modification throughout his psychological research, and he found 35 surface traits. Later, through the process of factor analysis, he identified 16 source traits, which are called the 16 personality factor. Cattell's 16 dimension of human personality traits, or the 16 personality factor, is a measure of normal personality and can also be used by psychologists and other mental health professionals as a clinical instrument to help diagnose psychiatric disorder and help with prognosis and therapy planning. The 16PF can also provide information relevant to clinical and counseling process, such as individuals' capacity for insight, self-esteem, cognitive style, internalization of standard, empathy, trust, quality of attachment, interpersonal needs, reaction towards dynamic of power, frustration, and coping style. Thus, the 16PF instrument provides clinicians with a normal range measurement of anxiety, adjustment, emotional stability, and behavioral problems. The 16PF result can also identify effective strategies for establishing working alliance, developing therapeutic plan, and selecting effective therapeutic intervention or modes of treatment to be used within the other areas of psychology, such as also in career and occupational selection. Cattell's stages for personality developments can be identified into 6 stages. So first is the infancy between birth to 6 years old, which characterizes weaning stage, the toilet training, the formation of ego, superego, and social status, while the childhood stage between 6 to 14 years, the independence from their parents and identification with peers. The third stage is the adolescence from 14 to 23 years, conflict about independence and self-assertion and sex. Fourth is the maturity between 23 to 50, where satisfaction with career, marriage, and family arises. Then late maturity comes, 50 to 65 years old. The personality changes in response to physical and social circumstances. And lastly, the old age, 65 and up, where adjustment to old, loss of friends, and career and status occurs. So, some critics on Cattell's theory. One main critic on Cattell's work in traits is that the opportunity of subjective judgment for the researcher to influence the outcome of the technique, the 16PF. Some critic argues that which factor analytic technique to apply and what aspect of behavior to be measured. Though this poses no weakness to the approach, the potential for subjective error in the factor analytic approach is very frequent. Also, the naming of identified factor also falls on the opportunity of subjective judgment of the researcher to have a potential subjective error if not handled properly. Research validation. So most of the research connected to Cattell's work is related to the 16PF work that he has, which showed to predict marital stability, that it can be fake if one wants to present themselves in a more favorable light. It can be used in many cultures, though with some limitations in some language where literal translation of the test is not possible. Also, the tests yield results indicating that some source traits are primarily inherited while the others are influenced by the environment. It can identify 16 source traits. At the same time, it can be used for clinical diagnosis and predicting success on job. And lastly, Murray's personology. Murray's personology. Henry Alexander Murray was an American psychologist in Harvard University. He was a director of the Harvard Psychological Clinic in the School of Arts and Science in 1930, where he developed a Turing personality called personology. He is also a co-developer with Christiana Morgan with the thematic apperception test, which are used to test personality teams. So he started his journey in psychology after reading Jung's work and eventually arranging a meeting with him. During this meeting, Carl Jung convinced Murray to study psychoanalysis, which he did at Harvard University, and after completing it, the training, he began teaching psychology and psychoanalytic theory. So although considered a trade theory, Murray's medical background combined with his analytic training gave a unique flair to his writing. So for Murray, he views human nature as rooted in psychoanalysis, and the chief business and aim of personology is to the reconstruction of the individual's past life experiences in order to explain their present behavior. So Murray favors freedom of choice over determinism, optimism over pessimism, causality over teleology, proactive and reactive, situational and constitutional, and uniqueness over universality. So according to Murray, individuals' personality develops dynamically as each person responds to a complex element in his or her specific environment. He viewed individual life as one unit and pointed out that we need to study the whole person in order to gain something on his personality, because episodes of his life gives an incomplete picture of the entire life unit. So to properly analyze, he favored a narrative approach in studying personality, which he called personology, a personological system that has been used in multiple academic disciplines such as philosophy, humanity, and societal and cultural studies. So essentially, personology is the study of the person himself, and he believed that there is no isolated piece of behavior could be ever understood without taking into account the fully functioning person. He also believed that personology is simple in structure but complex in detail. So 5 principles of personology according to Murray. Personality is rooted in the brain, and the idea of tension reduction is not for us to be hindered, but the process of acting out to reduce tension is satisfying. However, according to Murray, rather than the attainment of condition-free, reduced psychological and physiological conditions free from tension, we believe that the tension-free existence is itself a source of distress. So, according to Murray, we need still a tension in order to push us forward. Next is an individual personality continues to develop over time, and personality changes and it progress. It is not fixed or static, and it emphasizes the uniqueness of the person. And lastly, the uniqueness of the person is recognized, and he saw that an individual being is like no other person. So we're going to cut again our video, and we were going to continue later on about the dimension of personology according to Henry Murray.